Good evening, everyone. My name is Caitlin Taylor, and I am the Interim Athletic Director at the Shipley School. I am delighted to welcome each of you to our Recruiting During COVID-19 information session. Here at Shipley, we're fortunate to have established relationships with administrators in the collegiate ranks. We're thrilled to be able to call on their expertise during this ever-evolving recruiting process that we find ourselves in today. We've decided to put this workshop together in order to help those student athletes and families that potentially feel a little lost in the recruitment process to better help understand NCAA rules and timelines. It's our goal as an athletic department to meet our student athletes' needs and make sure we equip them with all the tools necessary to achieve excellence in the classroom and in competition. Our athletic department consists of many former collegiate athletes that value the time they spent in college sports. Our goal is to ensure that any capable and motivated student athlete that has aspirations to compete at the next level have all the information they require before getting there. This is our commitment to our community to help serve Shipley's students, not just while at Shipley, but beyond. We're thrilled to have three amazing college administrators from different divisions here with us tonight. Jill Bodensteiner, Director of Athletics from St. Joe's University, Lauren Packer-Webster, Director of Athletics and Recreation, Franklin and Marshall, and Deirdre Bertotti, Assistant Athletic Director and Compliance Officer at Westchester University. Whether you're a student athlete, a parent, or coach watching, many have the same questions. What does college recruitment look like amid COVID-19? How can I or my student help themselves get noticed? We are excited to host that conversation here tonight and look forward to hearing what these three administrators have to share. We'll properly introduce them here in a moment. Before I hand over the event, I'd like to introduce a few people from Shipley. Bruce Nicala is our Director of Physical Education and one of our boys basketball coaches. He has been instrumental in putting together this event for tonight. Sean Costello is our Associate Director of Athletics. He's our varsity girls soccer coach and varsity girls basketball coach. He's going to moderate the chat for us tonight. So if you have any questions as the night moves along, go ahead and put them into the chat. We have set aside a chunk of time after each question and towards the end to answer those. And we'll be sending out information following the session. So if you'd like to receive that, you can fill out the Google form that'll be in the chat here in a sec. I'm going to hand it over to Bruce Nicala, who will facilitate the conversation this evening. Thank you to each of you for joining us.
Thank you, Caitlin. Welcome aboard. Welcome tonight. Thank you, parents. Thank you, students, for taking the time to come and join us in this. We hope you'll find this beneficial. I just want to take a few minutes just to introduce our panelists. Jill Bodenstein began her tenure at St. Joseph University in 2018. She joined St. Joseph University after 20 years at her alma mater at the University of Notre Dame. She oversees the Hawks 20 Division I men's and women's sports, varsity sports, who are a member of the Athletic 10 Conference. Lauren Packer-Webster was appointed as Director of Athletics and Recreation in 2020. Picked a good time to be nominated there, Lauren. And she'll be responsible for managing and developing the 27 intercollegiate athletics programs within the Franklin and Marshall. Deirdre is an athletic director and a compliance director, a coordinator for the Westchester University. She has 13 years experience as an athletic administration and compliance in both Division I and Division II levels. She also coached Division I level athletics and also was an All-American, had an All-American career in college. But I'm going to start with Jill. Jill, welcome. Welcome all the panelists. And Jill, just want to start with you. Could you please paint for the audience a picture of what the climate looks like right now in colleges and universities with COVID being around, with things surrounding but not limited to sports this year, how that looks like, health and safety, sports sessions, sports seasons, and what coaches are looking at doing to get students noticed.
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone, and Bruce and Caitlin, thanks for inviting me to be with you. Greetings from Fort Myers, Florida, where I am in a bubble with my men's basketball team. We are at the Fort Myers tip-off, scheduled to play Auburn and Kansas on Thursday and Friday. So My internet's not great, so bear with me. But it's the most obviously unusual time, probably since World War II, that people have been selecting colleges. So there's new terms we're using, like what modality is your class? Is it virtual, hybrid, flex, in person? All sort of different lingo that we're talking about. Every institution has a detailed health and safety plan. That the primary elements of that are testing, contact tracing, and isolation and quarantine. Again, all new world for all of us. I think a really important aspect of any college you're looking at, whether to be an athlete or otherwise, is the communication. How's their dashboard? How's their COVID website? How transparent are folks being regarding what's going on their campus? Housing, what's the housing situation? Are they, virtual classes, no students living off campus? Is residential housing available or expected? What's the term of a housing contract in this day and age of uncertainty? So, all sorts of things at the university in and of itself. But when it comes to athletics, there's a couple things that I think surprise people the most when I talk to them. And that is, we offer 20 sports at the Division I level. And in terms of the situation in any of those sports at any given time, it depends vastly from sport to sport. It's not a one size fits all. And so right now what we're experiencing, and by the way, we get our guidance from the CDC, state law, local. So for us, Philadelphia Department of Public Health has been the most hands-on. I have new best friends at the Philadelphia Department of Public Health who I talk to regularly. And then the NCAA and of course your conference, in my case, the Atlantic 10. But each sport differs considerably, at least in my world, on three factors, as I mentioned. And the first is, are you in season or out of season? So the NCAA guidance related to COVID really depends on whether you're, out of your in-season competition or you're part of it. So, for example, none of my sports were in season this fall because the Atlantic 10 moved all fall sports to the spring, except for both basketball programs. Their official first day of a season was October 14th. And so the NCAA and the Philadelphia Department of Public Health took a very different approach to those sports that were in season versus out of season. And second is the level of risk. And so the NCAA defines each sport by a level of risk. So just some examples, high risk would be basketballs, lacrosse, soccer, are some of the sports we sponsor at St. Joe's that are high risk. Medium risk include baseball and softball. And then rowing. Rowing used to be high risk. It's now medium risk. In most contexts. And then low risk would be the golf, the tennis. No one knows what to do with the running sports because when you're off on your own, you're low risk, but when you're at a starting line, you're extremely high risk. So I think we've compromised and called them medium risk. So in addition to in season versus out of season, there's the level of risk. And then third, really important is indoor versus outdoor. So particularly with the Philadelphia Department of Public Health, they've taken a very strong stance that indoor has significantly more risk than outdoor. So just to give you a sense of why I'm here in Fort Myers and hoping to have a basketball season, our agreed upon health and safety plan, which we have to file for each sport with the city of Philadelphia, for our basketballs, it requires daily point of care testing because it's an indoor high risk sport that's in season. So that's sort of the granddaddy of them all. So we got a hold of point of care machines and our daily testing, all members of what we call, again, new lingo, tier 1, which is coaches, players, and anyone who has direct physical contact with the players. So that's just to give you a flavor of kind of the new COVID world we're living in. We are planning the basketballs to go this winter as long as the NCAA is doing that. That's 2 sports. That leaves our other 18 ready to go in the spring. And that's a lot to run 18 sports at once, as any administrator on this call knows. But that's what we're gearing up for. So that's just a little bit of a flavor from the university perspective, what to look for, and certainly from athletics, sort of how we're approaching each sport and why it's not a one-size-fits-all when it comes to the plans. I have a lot of people say, oh, you're playing basketball, so lacrosse is on. Well, we haven't even gotten to lacrosse because they're not in season. So again, that's kind of a 10,000-foot overview, and I'll let the others comment a little bit until I get into the secret sauce of what coaches are looking for.
So Lauren, going to you. I'm sorry, Deirdre, going to you. What is the Division II? What does it look like in Division II? I know there might be some overlaps within Division I, but what are there any things that are different, similar or slightly different to what Jill's spoken about?
So Jill said it very well. Really, for Division II, we follow kind of the same protocols. We don't deal with Philadelphia. We are in Chester County, so we would deal a little bit with the county. However, we take our rules from the NCAA, and then we come down to our conference, which is the PSAC, and then our university. So for Division II, at least for Westchester this year, in the fall, we had nobody on campus. All instruction was remote. We had virtual, what we call CARA, which is Countable Athletically Related Activities, which is your practice. Everything was virtual. We kind of went through that through the fall. And now for next semester, even though our instruction is remote, we will be welcoming back our student athletes, all of our student athletes, fall, winter, and spring for this year. However, unlike St. Joe's, we would only be competing our spring sport competitions. So our winter and our fall student athletes will not be competing this year, but they will be competing for the 21-22 academic year. But that's just a little different in our area and at Westchester. Now Division II is different throughout. I know there is some basketball being played right now. However, we did opt out of our winter and fall sports, but again, we are allowing them to participate in the fall. But Jill did a great job explaining the low risk, medium risk, high risk. We are all in the same situation with the NCAA.
Sorry. COVID has had its impact on us, and F&M. I'm fortunate that my wife works at F&M as well, so I've heard a little bit about what you're doing, Lauren. But I don't know if you want to just share a little bit about what you guys are doing for spring sports, knowing that F&M is a 4-year college, and usually you're done after that 4 years.
Sure. It's definitely an interesting time to come into my own as Director of Athletics and Recreation at Franklin and Marshall. We're a multi-divisional institution, so we sponsor Division I men's wrestling, and then the remainder of our sports are Division III. And so with the Division III philosophy, we're very focused on student athletes being integrated into the whole student body and being treated in generally the same manner. And so we broke for we finished in-person classes on Friday the 20th, and now we will not return to campus until February 1st for the start of our spring semester. So as of right now, we have no fall or winter student athletes either practicing or competing, at least through the end of the calendar year. And we're not sure if we will be able to bring them back in January because our general student population will not be allowed back until February. So it's very nuanced. There's very many external and internal factors that converge on the decision all at once. And it does begin at those top levels with the CDC and the state and your local levels, and then progresses into your different governing bodies. So managing all of those in addition to the Division III philosophy has really forced us to prioritize the integration of the student and the student athlete together. We will make a decision on our spring sport championships at a later date, and we still are holding out hope for the winter championships, but a number of our Division III fellow institutions and conferences have already canceled winter sports. And so for us, what have we been doing? We've been refocusing our efforts on what can we provide to the student athletes. So we've been providing some modified practices, but we've also been doing a lot of focusing on leadership training, leadership development, and enhancing the student aspect in addition to the limited athletic practices we can do. So for right now, we'll continue to refocus our efforts on that leadership development, and then as Jill alluded to, it is ever evolving, ever changing, and we are always adapting and adjusting to the new complexities that arise.
The complexities indeed. But yeah, so all of you look like you're talking about how you're helping support the students that you have on campus at this time. Jill, we spoke a little bit before this about the 6 things maybe that students at home should be doing if they're looking, potential students coming into Division 1, Division 2, Division 3. It might not look the same in all divisions, but I'd like maybe Jill to maybe just sum up those 6 points maybe that people can start to look at. And we'll take a few questions after that.
Okay, that sounds good, Bruce. So it's a really unusual time for recruiting, and I'm not the rules expert, and I'll leave some of that to Deirdre, who is the rules expert. But, there's sort of a conflation of roster management because coaches have student athletes with extra years of eligibility, meets financial aid, which are institutional decisions of how much athletics aid you have, meets COVID concerns, and everything kind of wrapped up into one. So, and the NCAA, as most of you know, has declared, in Division 1 since March 15th now through April 15th of 2020, a dead period. And so coaches are not getting that in-person contact, either going out to see student athletes or having student athletes come to campus for an athletic specific visit. So every Monday at noon, I meet with all of my coaches. There's about 50 of them, and we're on a call and we catch up and we tell stories and we pick each other up a little bit. So today's topic was, what tips would you all have for the Shipley School students that I can pass on to them? So here are the 6 tips from my head coaches from all 20 of our sports. Number 1, be proactive and communicate with schools you are interested in until you hear no. They are swamped. We've got coaches who are now 4th grade teachers with their own kids at home. We've got coaches who are, navigating, very unusual times. So be proactive. My coaches to a person said, we don't get annoyed. We might not respond constantly, but people really need to be proactive. Number 2, from my softball and baseball coaches, create an Instagram profile that focuses on your athletic and academic accomplishments. And don't make it the same one that you post other pictures on if you don't want coaches to see your entire personal life. But don't hesitate to create, I don't even really know what these words mean, but an Instagram profile that talks about your sport, your position, your class year, a little bit about your academic background and any honors that you have. Number 3, create a short intro video between 3 and 7 minutes that you can introduce yourself as a person, not as focused on highlights, but who are you, what's important to you academically, and then a little bit about your athletic prowess. And don't hesitate to send that proactively to coaches. Number 4, at some point, they're going to need game video. And when you send your game video, don't send it in a game if it's basketball that you won 62-5. That doesn't give our coaches any chance to see how you perform. So send it against the best competition you can, even if it wasn't your best game. Trust me, the coaches know what to look for in the student athlete. They don't need to see you scoring 2 goals. They can see your intangibles on film. So send those game films against the best competition that you can. And that's okay if it's live stream or recorded, but they're going to need to see some full matches or some full games. Number 5, with live events, don't hesitate to let a coach know, I'm playing in this club tournament and it's going to be streamed. This is my number and this is the time. This is my jersey number and this is the time we're playing and here's the link. And if that changes, please, please, please notify the coach of any changes because they've just changed their dinner plans and their child tutoring session to sit and watch your live stream. So if that changes, please don't hesitate to tell them. And number 6, as things start to develop a little more mutual interest, you're going to be getting to know the coaches on Zoom and by call, but please do not hesitate to ask, can I meet with some student athletes? Number 1, our coaches say, that's the best thing we hear because that lets me know that they want to know they're a part of something special when it comes to their teammates. And number two, it's just really important when you're missing that weekend visit that you at least have some Zoom calls and phone calls with the current student athletes. And then outside of the 6 points, please know, just this is COVID or non-COVID, how much coaches watch body language. They are masters at reading body language. If you're complaining to an official, if you're yelling at a teammate, and you know who they're also watching very, very closely is the parents. Coaches are becoming far more discerning, and there's sort of a running joke in higher education, like this kid's really good, but their parents are a complete pain in the butt. And is it worth me bringing these parents on for 4 years because their kid can do no wrong, and they're yelling at the refs, they're yelling at other student athletes. Coaches simply don't want to deal with that. So please know how important the intangibles are. And of course, that's different with each coach. I was blessed to spend 10 years with Muffet McGraw at Notre Dame. If there was a mouthy parent yelling at the officials, they weren't coming to Notre Dame because coach didn't need to deal with that, and she could have the pick of the group. So please know parent and student athlete nonverbals are being closely watched by coaches, and keep that in mind as well. So I'll stop there with my St. Joe's coaching fresh off the press today, 6 tips here in COVID.
Thank you so much, Jill. That's fantastic. Sean, do we have maybe 2 or 3 questions that have been in the chat?
So we don't have any questions, but some things that Jill just brought up made me think about the social media presence for student athletes and how important it is now, and how you monitor it. Going from a Division I all the way through to a Division III, I was wondering if anyone could speak to if there are any policies that their schools have about social media when you're on campus, and if you are on a team, knowing that coaches do look at it as a student athlete, potential recruit, but also student athletes that are on campus.
I can chime in here. So when I was coaching, we constantly monitored our student athletes' social media. They were required to friend me. I had like a blank account, so all their information would pop up. So then when I was also out recruiting, I would always look at social media. I would Google the names. Internet seems to be our best friend in Google as coaches. So I definitely, your presence on social media is important. Keep it clean, keep it professional, because they are all watching it.
Perfect. Well, talking about students,
Yeah.
about getting them in there. Oh, sorry, Jill, do you want to go in?
Yeah, I would just echo what Deirdre said. I'm not big on rules, so I don't have per se rules at St. Joe's, but you better believe, I mean, let's just attack the main issue head on. If you say something on your social media right now that indicates you're not open to having teammates of different races, religions, national origin, LGBTQIA+, you're not gonna find a home on a college athletics team. And so, Snapchat is the best thing to happen and the worst thing to happen, because if you get caught saying something that is not reflective of the kind of character, certainly that we want at St. Joe's, the coach probably won't pursue you, but if they do and it comes to me, that's not what we're trying to build. We're trying to build people who are open-minded and wanting to get to know people who are unlike themselves. And so, social media has derailed many a young men and women with college aspirations. So couldn't agree more that, what you say and do is who you are. And if you're comfortable with that, go for it. But you need to know the lens of which coaches and administrators are looking at that.
And Bruce, we just had 2 questions come in that both revolve around kind of the same topic. How early should kids start looking? How should a current 9th grader be thinking about the process? 2024 is near and far away.
Yeah. Jill, so Lauren, would you like to maybe lead us on that one?
I think it's going to depend on what you're looking for. In 9th grade, do you know what you want to be for the rest of your life? Are you willing to explore and devote some time to self-awareness and exploration of what is going to be your focus for your academic career? You know, it's really 4 years, but your career is for your life. And so the focus needs to be on that self-awareness and academic exploration. Certainly the different divisions allow for different contacts by coaches at different points. In Division III, we can start very early. We can start at the 9th grade level, but the priorities are different. And so I think having a general sense of what the philosophy is of each division and how you see yourself and what type of school and setting and academic program you may desire in the future, that's really where you can start with that long-term planning. And then as you progress and your skill set progresses and you're able to focus in on where you think you will be a fit and the community that will be a fit for you, that's when I think that you can really start to be aggressive with the 6 tips that Jill's coaches shared and make a name for yourself. Because until you are aware of where you want to be and how you want to progress for your future, there's really no sense in starting off with such a wide net.
Yeah, and that's a great segue to our next possible topic, which is talking about eligibility. And what does that recruitment process now look like? And Deirdre, I hope you can take us through that, because Deirdre, with your extensive experience, I'm sure you've seen it all. You probably know the book backwards, and maybe you can just summarize it for us.
Well, I feel like that book is ever changing with the new COVID rules at the moment.
Indeed.
I'm going to run through some of the NCAA Eligibility Center information. It is a lot of information. I will send a PowerPoint and a recorded webinar that the NCAA did. I will send that over to Caitlin to send out to everyone who has who put their email on that Google Sheet. But real quickly, so you can register at the Eligibility Center at any time. I would suggest maybe at 9th grade, you could just do a profile page just to kind of get used to the Eligibility Center. But really what the Eligibility Center does will do your academic evaluations and your amateurism evaluations for Division I and Division II. So a certification account would be required for Division I for the academic and amateurism certification. If you do not really know what division you want to go into, or a Division III, like I mentioned, you can just create a profile account at that time. And then if you need to adjust it to the certification account because you have some interest in Division I or Division II institutions, then you can do that at any time. So for Division I and Division II, you'll have to meet these core requirements, which are your academic courses. Your core requirements would be your Englishes, your maths, your physical or natural science, your social science, and then any other additional courses, mainly like your languages, your Spanishes, your Italians, your French, whatever languages that your school offers. So these courses need to be on the NCAA approved course list for your high school. So you can always meet with your athletic director or your guidance counselor to make sure that you are taking the proper classes that are approved by the NCAA to make sure you have a proper academic evaluation. So for Division I, there are 4 different standards, which we call an academic certification. You can either be an early academic qualifier, a final qualifier, an academic redshirt, or a non-qualifier. So this is all based around the core courses that I just spoke about. So to be an early academic qualifier for a Division I, you'd have to complete 14 core courses. And then you also have a 3.0 GPA or higher prior to going into your senior year. If you become an early academic qualifier, you are permitted to receive athletics aid, practice, and compete in your first year of competition. So these early academic qualifiers, the core courses that you are required to have are 3 Englishes, 2 years of math, 2 years of your natural or physical science, 2 years of an additional English, math, or natural physical science, and then 6 years of anything else. So again, the early academic qualifier, you'd receive athletics aid, practice, and compete. So then if you don't meet the early academic qualifier status, then you would go into your final qualifier, again, athletics aid, practice, and competition. So to meet the final qualifier status, you would need to meet what we call the 10-7. So prior to your senior year, which is your 7th semester, so prior before your 7th semester, you would have to have 10 core courses. 7 of those core courses need to be your English, your math, or your natural physical science. These 10 core courses will be locked. They'll take the best combination and they'll be locked, and you cannot replace or repeat these core courses to get a higher grade to boost your GPA. And then you'll have an additional 6 to be able to do that, to boost your GPA to get to the 2.3. So you'll, like I said, you'll have to meet the 10-7 and then the 16 core courses by the time you graduate, a 2.3 cumulative GPA or higher in your core courses. That GPA cannot include any other courses that are not approved by the NCAA. And then you'll also need to submit proof of graduation. So these 16 core courses for Division I are for your 4 Englishes. So it'd be 4 years of English, 3 years of math, 2 years of a natural physical science, 1 year additional natural physical science, English or math, and then 4 years of additional courses. So these additional courses, like I mentioned before, could be your languages or anything left over of like your social sciences, because you only needed 2 years. So you could use your junior and senior social sciences as one of those 4 additional core courses. So again, that was for final qualifier, athletics aid, practice, and competition you'd be permitted to do. So then if you do not meet any of those requirements I just mentioned, you could become an academic redshirt. Again, you would have to meet the 16 core courses I just mentioned as a final qualifier, earn a GPA of between 2.0 and 2.29, and then submit the proof of graduation. If you become an academic redshirt, in your first year, you'd only be permitted to receive athletics aid and practice. There would be no competition permitted during your first year. So then if you don't meet any of the other requirements, you would become a non-qualifier. And unfortunately, with a non-qualifier, you would not be permitted to receive athletics aid, compete, or practice. So that is for Division I. So Division II is very similar. So that we also have 4 standards, which is your early academic qualifier, your qualifier, and then we call it a partial qualifier, where Division I says academic redshirt. We call it a partial qualifier and then a non-qualifier. Very similar situation. Early academic qualifier, athletics aid, practice, and compete. You'll complete the 14 core courses, and you have to have a GPA of 2.5 or higher. So those 14 core courses, 3 years will be in English, 3 years will be in math, 2 years would be in your natural or physical science, and then 6 additional courses can be anywhere else. So that would be your early academic qualifier, athletics aid, practice, and competition would be permitted your first year. So then we move on to the qualifier. Again, just like Division I, you'll have 16 core courses, but unlike Division I with the 2.3, Division II requires a 2.2 GPA, and then also submit proof of graduation. So with Division II, the core courses are a little different. So for Division II, you need 3 years of English, 2 years of math, 2 years of natural physical science, and then 3 years of additional English, math, or natural or physical science, and then 2 years of your social science, and then 4 years of your additional courses, which again could be your languages or anything that's left over from your other core courses. Qualifier, athletics aid, practice, and competition would be permitted during your first year. So then if you do not meet those requirements, you could go into as a partial qualifier, which is this very similar situation to Division I. They were the academic redshirt. Division II is called a partial qualifier. Complete 16 core courses. You would earn the 2.0 to 2.19 GPA and submit proof of graduation to the Eligibility Center. So if you're a partial qualifier, you'd be permitted to receive athletics aid and practice, but no competition for their first year of residence at the institution. So if you don't meet the partial qualifier requirements, the qualifier requirements, or the early academic qualifier requirements, then you would become a non-qualifier. And just like Division I, no athletics aid, no practice, or no competition during your first year at that institution. So the difference this year for student athletes that would be prospective student athletes that would be enrolling into the 21-22 academic year, the NCAA eligibility is not requiring a test scores. Typically they would be, pre-COVID. But for 21, 22 prospective student athletes that would be enrolling during that year, so current seniors, you would not need to submit test scores. However, I would definitely look at the universities that you are looking at, because their admissions office may be requiring test scores as well. So it's a good idea to kind of see where you're looking at, making sure that, you know, if you decide not to take the test scores, make sure that you're able to not submit test scores for the university. Because just because the eligibility center says no test scores, they're two different entities. So make sure that the institution's not requiring the test scores. So that is it for the NCAA Eligibility Center. That, I know that's a lot of information, can get very confusing. So I can take a few questions on that. A lot of these answers may be prospective student athlete specific.
Jill is bowing down. Jill says, well done. Can we just hold off on the questions for a little bit and just talk a little bit about roster management and how, you know, obviously you've talked a little bit about financial aid and how that affects, how COVID has affected that. So I'm just talking, Lauren, would you be able to talk to us a little bit about roster management and financial aid and scholarships and potential scholarships that are now happening, and what that has done with the numbers that have increased of kids who are eligible?
Sure. So pre-COVID, every parent and prospective student athlete did a great amount of research. They looked at the schools, the surrounding areas, the academic programs, but I doubt that anyone truly got into the weeds. And in a COVID and probably post-COVID environment, as a parent and prospective student athlete, you're really going to want to understand how that institution operates. And so you're going to want to look at the numbers on the rosters. Depending on what the current students do, we could see a bottleneck in roster sizes for potentially up to the next 4 years. This isn't necessarily a problem that will solve itself once this year's seniors graduate. You know, as Deirdre said, we do have some legislative rules that are now allow for extra seasons of competition for student athletes. So you could potentially be a freshman this year and planning your career now to span 5 years. So this is not something that is going to go away at the end of this academic year. So get in the weeds, ask how the institution operates, look at the rosters. You should do your research. What is the composition of the roster, not only by class year and by position, but also drill down further and get a sense of who's returning, who does the coach or the institution anticipate perhaps being there for the 5 years instead of 4. It will give you a much better sense of, number one, what the institution's commitment to its student athletes are, and then number two, the level of engagement that the student athletes have and the affinity for that institution. It will also give you a really good understanding when you get into the details of what you need to succeed there. So what is the institution or the conference's policy on redshirting, taking that extra year? What's the institution's financial aid policy and the academic policy? So does the institution allow you to receive more than 4 years of financial aid? If so, what criteria do you need to consider? Also things that you may not be thinking about now, but if you choose to go a 5th year for some reason, is it going to be less expensive or more expensive if you go full-time or part-time in that 5th year? Or how will your summer classes or January term classes affect that? So this is much more an exercise in long-term, long-range strategic planning for families, I think, than it has ever been in a pre-COVID world. And lastly, in terms of that stretching out your academic experience, if for whatever reason you want to go beyond 4 years, what is the policy and what is the process for your institution? It is different at each institution. It could be different based on the division that you are aspiring to compete at. And it also could be controlled by other factors, such as the conference, or, you know, there's just so many variables right now that my best advice would be get into the weeds, figure out how the institution operates, and does that become compatible with your long range plan, because this is really going to be about finding the fit that is going to work for you. And we all have so many stresses right now. You want to make sure that you do that due diligence and that you get it right, so that you're not having to go through all of this a second time if that institution turns out to not be what you expected for your experience.
Yeah. And Jill, obviously the bottleneck extends beyond college and Division I, especially Division I athletes who end up going pro. Obviously there's a bottleneck that exists up there. Can you speak a little bit about what maybe St. Joe's has done in terms of roster management, in terms of the new law that talks about allowing age limits to be exceeded, and just where you're getting, how's that strain and how's that balance been for you creating like a scholarship for FA?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Deirdre and Lauren, that was like PhD level descriptions of both of your topics. So thank you guys for that. So at St. Joe's, I'll give you a few statistics. We have 475 student athletes across 20 sports. This year, 2020-21, the academic year we're in now, we had 25 seniors return who were spring athletes who graduated this past May, who returned for that extra year of eligibility. So 25 out of 475 came back. We had 3 incoming freshmen who chose to defer, 3 incoming internationals who couldn't get in the country and so enrolled online. And so far this fall, we've had 3 student athletes enter the transfer portal, with all 3 of them saying they've just decided they want to be closer to home due to the uncertainty of COVID. So you can see we had more returners than we have people not coming. 25 returned, 9 have for some reason opted out. I should also note we did offer to all student athletes, of course, that you could opt out this year for COVID reasons and maintain your whatever level of athletics aid. So we had 1 individual who opted out due to concerns of COVID, and she happened to be on a full athletic scholarship, and she maintained that. So you're right, Bruce, there's more been incoming and staying than there have been going out. What we've told, and Lauren's just spot on, I think I think a lot of people don't understand how many of these decisions are institutional. So in other words, the NCAA says you can have all your spring athletes back for another year of eligibility. Then it becomes at St. Joe's, what's our athletics aid budget? And how much aid are our coaches going to have? So if they normally, let's say a lacrosse coach normally has 12.6 scholarships to spread across 50 guys. By the way, we have an average men's lacrosse roster of 50. It now stands at 61 right now, because a lot of those super seniors were men's lacrosse. They were having a great top 20 season last year, and they wanted to relive that glory. So what I say to Taylor Ray, my head coach, is you have that same budget. I'm not giving you, I can't, even if the NCAA says you can exceed your scholarship limit, I can't financially. So you have the same 12 scholarships. You've got to figure that out over the coming years. If people want to come back, that's somebody else who's not getting that money. And I think at least in the Atlantic 10, which is Davidson, Dayton, VCU, UMass, I think that's how the vast majority, LaSalle, of our peers have been treating it as well. So the NCAA makes their eligibility, everybody gets an extra year. Financially, we're sort of stuck with our financial aid budgets, which actually have served us quite well. So I think that's really what's happening on our place. I told the coaches, and I will continue to tell them this, I want you to sit down with each senior from last spring, and I want you to say, close your eyes and envision that you're giving up a job to come back. Envision a year that's going to be full of stops and starts. I want to know what your academic plan is and how that's going to further your career aspirations, because I don't want people coming back just to come back and not go into class. And then number 3, do you both understand, you coach and you player, playing time and financial aid? I want there to be very clear expectations. I don't want anyone coming back to St. Joe's thinking they're going to be a starter or get full aid or whatever it might be, or have an academic program that they don't really care about. So that's what we'll continue to do now as more and more St. Joe's students have an extra year of eligibility. We'll have very real conversations with coaches and student athletes. I'm not trying to manage those young men and women out, but I think everyone needs to be really very realistic about that experience and that it's mutually beneficial. So that's a little bit about our roster management, Bruce, and how we're handling it. But there's no doubt it's caused some bottlenecking at both the freshmen coming in. I will say, though, we're continuing to recruit. I mean, we signed the exact same number of NLIs this past November, 2 weeks ago, that we did in the previous years. So we're continuing to recruit really the same number of bodies because that's important to the future of the group. And Sean, do you mind if I tackle a question while I'm on, and then I'll mute myself? Somebody asked a great question about sports sponsorship.
Yeah, go for it.
And so okay, so that's something that's, we've had many friends of mine, whether it's William and Mary, LaSalle, George Washington, have eliminated sports. I think at last count I looked in Division I, it was 32 schools have eliminated a total of 93 sports. In large part, at least on the surface, due to COVID. So those are frank conversations you should be having as well. And I've had prospective student athlete parents call me and say, are you going to continue to sponsor baseball? Are you going to continue to sponsor softball? And so one thing for the parents and student athletes to know is the NCAA minimums in Division I. So to be a Division I member at a non-football school like St. Joe's, you have to sponsor 14. To be an NCAA Division I member that sponsors football, you have to sponsor 16. So at St. Joe's, we look to have 20 sports, but men's rowing is not an NCAA sport for Title IX reasons. So we sponsor 19 Division I sports, and 14 is our minimum. When you compress our track and fields, notably cross country, indoor track, and outdoor track are 3 separate sports. We really sponsor 15 sports. So we're basically at the minimum, unless I wanted to cut indoor track, which I have no desire to do. So keep those numbers in mind. LaSalle, for a school smaller than St. Joe's, I believe was at 27 when their minimum, maybe 25, when their minimum is 14. So that's why a lot of schools are saying, wait a minute, we got to get closer to that minimum so we can take care of the student athletes who are here. I can't deny that there have been cuts. It's been for different reasons at every institution, and keep those minimum numbers, and also don't underestimate the role that Title IX plays in those decisions. So to cut to the chase, Title IX says our student athlete participation numbers need to mirror our undergraduate enrollment. So at St. Joe's, if we're 55% female undergrad enrollment at the entire institution, 45 male, I should have in the neighborhood of 50 to 55% of my athletes should be women. That means schools are much less likely to cut female sports because most of us are striving to meet that Title IX requirement. So those are just a few observations on the sports sponsorship front from a Division I perspective.
Thanks, Jill. Sean, do you want to just maybe pick 2 questions that we can answer? We're going to come towards there.
Yeah, they actually knocked out 3 while they were going there, so that was great. There's one question here that Jill kind of hit on actually in her 6 tips, but maybe I can add to it to see what we can get going. It's how should I be seen by college coaches if there are no ID camps offered in few games? Also, what should I do if a coach doesn't respond to an email? And I was wondering if maybe we could also talk to the different levels of Division I, Division II, Division III, and the quality of athletics that go on in all those areas, and not to pigeonhole yourself into one specific track, specifically early on in your high school career.
Deirdre, you want to start us off?
Sure. I think to get noticed, and if they don't respond to you, I think Jill hit on it before, just keep emailing, keep sending film, YouTube videos, anything that you can do. Again, like I mentioned before, social media, keep it clean, but you can also post your videos and everything there. Sean, there was one more question in there that you asked. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, just talking about the different level of athlete and the level of competition at the different level, Division I, Division II, Division III. Having played at Division I and Division III, there's high-level athletes across the board, and I think that's something maybe high school athletes don't understand necessarily.
Right. So like Sean just mentioned, don't pigeonhole yourself in Division I, Division II, or Division III. Keep it broad until you start getting into your senior year, but still, like, don't set your mind on one school. Like Lauren mentioned, make sure it's the right fit for you academically, athletically, personally, emotionally. I think it's a good idea to, like they've been saying, just get in the weeds of it. Unlike Division I, Division II is actually out there recruiting. We are not in a dead period. We are in our regular evaluation and contact period. So our Division II coaches are out there and out recruiting. And if you let them know that you're at a certain camp or, in a certain game, let them know. They will come out and watch you. Now, it is dependent upon what institution and their COVID rules, but Westchester, we're giving them full reins. Go out and recruit while you can at this time, because we just don't know what tomorrow will bring.
Lauren, your school is are coaches also recruiting during this time?
That's correct. Division III, we are permitted to recruit on campus, off campus, and Franklin and Marshall does allow for our coaches to recruit off campus. I think it's really important to extend each other some grace right now. So everyone has been working in education with their foot on the gas pedal since March. And so it's just really important to understand how we're all just consumed with electronics more so than we've ever been. We're trying to adapt and evolve and adjust to those. And so it's going to take coaches some time to catch up on the massive amounts of communications that they are both receiving and sending. And so I think it's just really important that, as much as you want to be seen, you've really got to do your diligence. You've got to make the process for whoever is consuming your communication in whatever method you're choosing. You need to make that as easy as possible. And so being concise, being precise, and really having all of your information ready to go so that a coach doesn't have to do any extra legwork on their end, that will increase your chances of success in garnering that attention. And it also really helps you to solidify, this is where I want to be. These are my academic preferences. This is who I am as an individual. So if you don't have your elevator pitch ready, you don't wait until it's time to get an internship in college. Start working on your elevator pitch and giving those short snippets to the coaches through the different communication platforms that you choose. Mm-hmm. That would be my advice.
Yep. Joe, Joe, from the Division I standpoint, I know obviously coaches are recruiting because you're in Florida and working hard, but is there anything that you'd maybe like to add on to that conversation that we just had?
You know what, I'll use this as my free form response as we wrap up here. But number one, so Division I is not out on the road recruiting, but you can come to campus at any Division I institution and take any campus tour that's open to any prospective student. So I think we had a couple field hockey kids come through admissions and do a tour a few weeks ago, and they committed after the tour. They didn't have any coach contact, but you are allowed to tour Division I campuses. And now I'm going to get broader and broader. The second thing is, if you're determined to be a college athlete, and I'm as big a proponent of that as anyone, your coach is going to be probably 80% of your experience. And your teammates as well, but coaches really have a significant impact. And so make sure before you make a college selection that you feel like you've had a chance to really understand and get to know the coach, and that you two are on the same page. And then finally, and Lauren just sort of referred to this, but I came down to go into, when I was in your shoes, I was a high school senior at Valparaiso, Indiana, and I was a decent basketball player, and it came down to going to Notre Dame and not being a student athlete. They had very little interest to zero interest in me, or going to another dream school, which was WashU in St. Louis, to Division III to play basketball. And at the end of the day, I looked in the mirror and said, I'm probably not going to be a pro athlete. Where will I be happiest? And I was a homebody, and I grew up 30 minutes outside of Notre Dame. And I just knew that that was the right place for me. And I had an amazing experience without intercollegiate athletics. So I think at the end of the day, unless you're determined to make your sport your professional career, Lauren alluded to it, Deirdre's alluded to it, find the right fit for you. And make sure whatever you're thinking of academically, are you a big school, small school, commuter school, residential school, city, suburbs? What are the people like? Is it religious affiliated or not? All those things are this could be the best 4 years of your life. And so really kick back and make sure you do an assessment of everything that's important to you about those 4 or 5 college years, and pick what's best for you. Don't listen to what your coach wants you to do, what your parents are demanding that you should do. Really do some serious self-reflection on what's going to be the best experience of your college career, and go for it.
Perfect. As a great segue to our last and final parting point, Lauren, I would like you to maybe lead us on this one here. Shipley's talked about this year as being a year like no other. Obviously, COVID has changed a lot in this world. My question to you is very briefly, and because we're running a little bit out of time, but very briefly, would you maybe talk a little bit about what kind of things parents should be looking at that they would normally overlook during this time?
I think in the virtual setting, you really want to try and find, what is the community like? How does the different departments at the institution support each other? Because now more than ever, we're longing for that personal interaction, that sense of community and support. And so getting a holistic sense of how that institution operates and how they'll support your son or daughter as they move forward in those 4 years will be probably the most important thing that you do. And then the second most important thing will be to get into the details, to ask questions, to know what questions to ask, and then always ask, what else do I need to know? Is there anything else that's specific to your institution I should know? And don't be afraid to share, this is what X institution does. Do you do it similarly at Y institution? I think that those are the 2 biggest points: community and how that institution operates independently.
Now, Deirdre, being an eligibility expert, PhD in the making, do you have like one point that people should really be asking themselves?
I think when you're speaking with the coaches, because now in Division I, Division II, and Division III, we have those COVID-19 season of competition waivers that all fall and winter sports will get their year back. They need to be asking coaches, which roster management, what do your rosters look like? Do you have an idea of how many student athletes may return? Also in Division I and Division II, we have the extension of eligibility waivers. So for Division I, they had to be 5 consecutive years. Now with the extension, they could go 6. In Division II, we'd have 10 full-time semesters. Now they can go into 12 full-time semesters. So I think looking at their roster management, their rosters of student athletes that they have currently, and also financial aid. A lot of Division II financial aid comes from fundraising. So for example, with Westchester, we have not been able to use our facilities now since March to fundraise. So our scholarship dollars are slightly on the lower side. Luckily, we had a lot in the bank to help out, but each institution is different. So ask them about their scholarship model, and really where you can even ask them, where is that money coming from? Is it coming from fundraised money or institutional money? So I think a lot of information about financial aid and their roster management is something to be asking coaches, and if you have access to the administration. And also last thing would be for academics, do you have like an academic mentoring program to help the student athletes kind of filter into their first year, adapt to the college life, especially our freshmen now, they're adapting to the virtual world. Some of them have maybe been on campus once or twice, and they're not acclimated properly into the university until maybe their spring semester or sophomore year. So kind of see what supports that are also in place for our student athletes as far as academically and personally.
Yeah. And Jill, you spoke a little bit about institutional operations. Would you like to make maybe 1 or 2 passing comments about that as a summary?
Yeah, I would echo what my colleagues here said, and just, challenging times kind of show the true colors of institutions. I think so many local institutions have done a phenomenal job navigating a really, really tough time. But if I were a parent, I would really want to know how an institution communicates with me, with my student athletes. At the beginning of all this, I put together a communication matrix, and student athletes, coaches, and parents were 1, 2, and 3, with donors after that. And so, how are you going to hear what's going on? We had multiple webinars for our parents. I'm sure you have a lot of questions. Log in. I'll be there. Ask me anything. I think transparency, because uncertainty causes anxiety. And I think that transparency helps reduce anxiety. So I really do think in this day and age, it's very important as an institution and as a department how we communicate with our critical constituents, who are our student athletes and their families.
And yeah, so we've reached the end of our panelist talk. I'm sure there are a few questions. Sean, I'd like you maybe to take it away.
Yeah, sure. So first, just want to remind all of our viewers that if you go into the chat of the YouTube, that to fill that out so we can get access to your questions and get back to you. Also, just a huge thank you to Jill, Deirdre, and Lauren. The amount of messages I've received during this and how beneficial and how informative from students, coaches, families. We really appreciate you taking some time out of your incredibly busy schedules to give back and help us through some of this. And Bruce, of course, thank you for being a driving force through all this, and Caitlin helping getting this going. But extremely grateful for the three of you joining us on this call and helping so many student athletes and families really try to navigate a crazy time. And best of luck to all of you in hopefully some winter seasons, but definitely some spring seasons. And you've made three schools fans now, so we're excited to watch you guys. Thank you so much, and
awesome. Good luck, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.